done things. They're going to test the limits, and they need parents that'll be there to train them. So thank you for being there for your kids. And don't beat yourself up because you make a mistake now and then. You're going to. Like anything else, we just need to correct mistakes and keep working there for our kids. And it pays off so much. All right, let's move on now to number 8. Fathers provoking to wrath, discouraging their children. So in Colossians 3, Paul said, fathers, provoke not your children, that they be not discouraged. In Ephesians, he said, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but nurture them in the chastening and admonition of the Lord. And we mentioned this yesterday. Why did Paul say this to fathers? Are there mothers that provoke their children to wrath and discourage their children? Yeah. So why does Paul single out fathers? I think because it's a little bit more in the nature of a man to fall into this error. And so let's pay attention to it. Moms and dads both, but especially here focused on dads. Some of you, in an audience of this size, I'm going to bet there are some people here who grew up in a home where your father didn't praise you, didn't show you much affection, didn't give you many hugs, didn't say much to you when you did what you were supposed to do, but you were in trouble when you didn't do what he wanted. And I'm going to guess that there's some people who grew up in a home like that, and I'm sorry. Nobody grows up in a perfect home, but that can be a painful thing. I've known grown women who, as adults, one of the things that just hurts them is like, I think one lady I think she said she remembered one time that her dad hugged her. Or I think another woman said maybe she never remembered her dad ever saying, I love you. And that just leaves a void. It's just sad. Children need, and in those families sometimes, you can have done real well on your tests and you want to show your dad, and it's like, okay, good, I'm busy. If you mowed the lawn and you did a good job, you don't hear a thing. But if you mowed over a little bit of the flower patch or something, you're in trouble. And it's just, seems like no satisfying, just grumpiness if you did something wrong. Dads, don't be like that. Don't be like that. Kids need love. They need security. There needs to be joy in their lives. They need to learn how to work. They need to learn to obey. Man, have fun with your kids. Enjoy them. But there are men that are like that. It's criticism or nothing. Also, there's a mistake of expecting talents beyond their capacity. Just because it's your dream when the doctor says it's a boy and you thought you were going to be a Major League Baseball pitcher and you never made it on the college team, and then when you find out it's a boy, you're going to try to relive your life through your kid. If he likes baseball, fine. But if he doesn't, don't try to. If he weighs 100 pounds soaking wet, don't think he's going to be a linebacker. If she's tone deaf, don't expect that she's going to be an opera singer. And I'll tell you something I respect that I see in parents of children with special needs. Parents usually rise really well to the occasion. It's a very challenging thing. But when those parents love those children and don't expect what they can't do, but do expect what they can do. So don't expect things a child can't do, but say a child has this disability or that disability, but it doesn't mean that they can't be a moral person. It doesn't mean that they can't be a kind person. It doesn't mean that they can't be a good person. Let me tell you, this was a physical disability, but it illustrates the point. I used to study with an elderly gentleman who told me about at Thanksgiving dinner one time, there was somebody, I don't know, extended family or whatever he had not met before, who didn't have any lower arms or hands. And he was just amazed. During the Thanksgiving meal, the young man would sit there and he would feed himself with no hands. So he had a couple of nubs, and he would take the spoon with his mouth, and he would slide the spoon under where he wanted to bite, and he would use one of his nubs, and he would flip the spoon and catch the food in his mouth. And he ate his Thanksgiving dinner that way. And my friend said, I just was amazed. He said, at the end of the meal, there were more crumbs and mess around my plate than there was around his. And he said afterwards, you know, when you're having snacks and stuff, fudge or whatever, the mom would just every once in a while come by and put a snack on his shoulder. And when he got ready for it, he would just flip it in. Now I want you to stop and think of the opposite. What if mom had just decided to do everything for him? Now there's some things that he's not going to be able to do. He's not going to be able to be a typist. You know, he's not going to play the violin, okay? But he can feed himself. What if mom decided that this young man can't feed himself and she's out there spoon-fed him the whole time? Or put him on an IV over here while everybody else enjoys a good meal? How sad would that be? But what did she do? What did she do? She knew there were things her son couldn't do, but she knew there were things he could do, and she raised him to be able to do what he could do. Don't expect what they can't do. Imagine, we talked about before the importance of boundaries, but another thing is let the boundaries be where they are. Like if any of you have cattle, you may have an electric fence. And I've heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that some farmers, after a while, they just turn off the electricity because you don't need it anymore. Because the cattle have learned there's the electric fence, you just don't go up there. But I want you to imagine how discontent a cow you would be if you were in a pasture with electric fence and instead of the fence being stable, it was moving around all the time. So like where's the fence? You see some nice grass or clover and all, bang, here comes the fence. Some kids grow up in a house like that. Dad comes home, you don't know what kind of mood he's going to be in. You don't know what he's going to do today. It's better when you know what Dad's going to do. He's going to love you. He's going to protect you. He's going to do things with you. He's going to be interested in you. He's going to train you. And if you need discipline, he's going to discipline you. Know where the boundaries are. Number 9, failing to parent with joy. You ever seen a household where they had rules? And I started to say this a while ago and I didn't finish saying it. If you have 5 rules in your house and those rules are enforced, that's better than having 1,012 rules in the house and they're inconsistent. And when your kids go to other people's houses, teach your kids to respect the rule of another house. Like if in your house you wear shoes in the house, that's fine. But if you go to grandma's house or a friend's house and they don't wear shoes in the house, teach your kids to respect the rules of that house and take their shoes off. It's learning to obey rules is more important than all the particular rules. Some rules are moral and they're absolutes, some aren't. But have you ever been in a house where they got rules? You know, no elbows on the table. But there's just no joy. You know, you have to say, pass the peas, please. You can't just say, give me some peas. But there's, pass the peas, please. Thank you. And just, nobody's happy. They're following some rules, but nobody's happy. Don't make a kid grow up in a house like that. Look at this. Look at all these references of joy. Proverbs 5, the relationship between mom and dad. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. Proverbs 23, the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. He will have joy of him. Let your father and mother be glad. Let her rejoice who gave birth to you. Proverbs 23, 24, and 25. Proverbs 15, a joyful heart makes a cheerful face. When the heart is sad, the spirit is broken. A cheerful heart has a continual feast. Have you noticed that? Some people are just cheerful. And they're able to look on the bright side of things and like Paul, the eternal side of things. And Paul can write as a prisoner, he can write Philippians just full of joy. And there's other people, it can be a beautiful day and they're in good health and they're just miserable all the time. What a waste. A cheerful heart has a continual feast. Better is a dish of vegetables where love is than fattened ox served with hatred. Proverbs 31, what was on the tongue of the worthy woman? The law of kindness was on her tongue. A joyful heart is good medicine. A crushed spirit dries up the bones. I started doing something several years ago when I'm with a group of parents sitting in a class setting or other things and stuff, and I asked a question. And you can think about this for a minute now. All of you think in your mind about a warm, fond memory you have between you and your father or you and your mother. Everybody just think about that for a minute. What's a warm, fond memory that you have about your mom or your dad? Now, in smaller settings where we've been having discussions and stuff, I ask people to go around and give them. And I've been amazed at the answers. Most of them didn't involve money at all. I mean, maybe a few cents. Most of them were not things that the parent would have ever guessed would be remembered. They were things like, you know, at a certain time of the week, me and my dad, this one lady said, I would get up in the lazy boy with Dad and we would eat sardines and we would watch this one comedy together. And that's what she remembers. Or somebody else, going shopping with your mom. What, for like a new computer? Like, no, just going shopping with my mom. Or making cookies. Or Friday night was game night. Or Sunday night, Dad would pop popcorn. One person said it was when they went on a cruise. But there was a little bit of reason why. His parents were divorced. Mom had custody and he didn't get that much time with his dad. And his dad had won 2 tickets for a cruise. And so he asked his son to go with him. So of course the son enjoyed the cruise, but it was more than just a cruise. You know, he got to spend that extra time with his dad. Nobody said the time we spent $6,000 to go to Disney World. Sometimes parents think, oh, this is what will be a big impression. This will be what's great. Most people, and you can think in your own mind, and I'm sorry if somebody here remembers, wow, the time we went to Disney World. I'm not trying to pick on you. But I bet a bunch of you thought of something simple, maybe a certain routine, a certain enjoyment, that if your mom and dad had guessed what you would remember this many years later, your mom and dad would have never guessed it was that thing. If your thing was in that category, raise your hand. All right. Your children, you can do special things for them and do. But a lot of things are just simple, little joyous, fun routines. And sometimes it can be a silly game, a silly routine. Kids enjoy routine. They enjoy things. Enjoy your kids. Joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit. Mistake number 10, failing to use rod and reproof. We've talked about this verse several times. If you just use the rod, what does he learn? Kid's doing something, whack! Dad whacked him. What's he learn? Maybe get away from Dad. You know, it's like, Dad's in a bad mood, go to a different room. Doesn't mean he's learned anything. Just reproof. So Bertina was at Walmart one time, and there's this kid screaming at his mom. He's sitting in the little, buggy seat. And he's yelling at her and screaming at her, I hate you! And he's trying to kick her. And Mom had probably read one of those parenting magazines or something. And so she's sharing with her child how she feels. And while he's screaming at her, saying, I hate you, and trying to kick her, she says, it doesn't make Mommy feel good when you do that? Of course, he didn't go, oh, I beg your pardon. He wasn't trying to make mommy feel good. He was trying to make mommy feel as bad as he could. And her telling him her feelings was not being apparent. He just leaned as far forward in the thing as he could to get as close to her face as he could and just yelled, shut up! You know, as loud, really loud in her face. Did she reprove him? Oh, yes. She let him know that that didn't make mommy feel good. Did it make any difference to him? No. He needed some consequences. It's the rod and reproof together. There's value in the lecture. How many of you grew up in a home where you did get loving discipline, but before you got loving discipline, you had to be talked to? If you grew up in a home like that, raise your hand. All right. How many of you wished they would stop talking and just get the spanking over with? Yeah. Why? Why? The spanking was going to hurt here, but the talk hurt here. And so that's why we're sometimes, okay, yeah, okay, I know, all right. Yeah, I wouldn't have liked it if I'd done that to my brother. Just spank me and get it over with. That's what you're saying. Don't be saying it, but you're feeling it. The rod and reproof, that lecture, the talking to, that's part of the training. They need to realize, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. And then it's followed up by this when they're little. When they're older, you can do other things. We can talk about that in a minute. But there's something else too, and it's the anticipation factor. If you go to the doctor and he says, you know, you got to get a shot. It stings a little bit, but it doesn't hurt bad. But if you go to the doctor and he says, hate to tell you this, but you got to get a shot. And it's going to hurt. Roll up your sleeve, you know. I hate doing this. You know, it's different. He says, you might want to hold on to something. It kind of turbo boosts. And so if you just walk up, okay, you shouldn't have done that, and you give kids spanking, that's not the same as actually talking to them and then give them the spanking. And when they're little, it doesn't need to be much. As they get older, it needs to be more. And then at a certain age, it shouldn't be a spanking. Like with teenagers, sometimes I found effective. So supposed to keep your room cleaner, supposed to not talk rude to your sister. Okay, yes, sir. But then out of force of habit, the next day he talks rude to his sister or something. Well, when they're older, I found it works a lot better to just say, you know, $5. It's like, don't talk rude to your sister. And then, you do it again, $5. It's not that the other day he was deciding, I'm going to be rude to my sister anyway. It's just he's a teenager. He's not paying enough attention. Hey, and as adults, if we get pulled over for rolling through a stop sign and we pay for a ticket, what does that do? It gets our attention. We realize, oh, yeah, that's a rule. And if you pay for 2 of those tickets, $5, that'll get their attention. The rod and reproof for the younger child brings wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. Number 11, settling for situation control instead of training the child. This is important. This is about Brienne, who is due this week. So if you'll pray for her, her baby number 4 is due this very week. That's her right there in the front. This is over in Czechoslovakia. That's April in the back, Adam, and then Brienne, my 3 oldest. And Brienne's about this age in the story that I'm about to share with you. And Brienne, she was such a good little girl. I almost never needed to spank Brienne. One of mine, he got so many spankings. He never decided it was like go for it all day like 3 of them did. And he kept getting spankings. Brienne almost never needed a spanker. When she was little, when she was a baby, one lady in Europe just called her Smiley because she was just smiling all the time. By the way, you know Stephen Rouse. This is Stephen's wife, Brienne, my middle daughter. So one time, we're getting in the car, and she was supposed to buckle herself into her little car seat. At the time, the laws were different, and a car seat was all she had to have that she could buckle herself. And that was her job. So we got in the car, and like I said, up till this point, I'd given her a few mild spankings, but she was just such a good, happy little girl. She was, I would say, the easiest child I'd had up to that point, and maybe the easiest of all 6 up to that point. But on this day, she decided not to obey. And she doesn't get in the car seat, and I put it in reverse, and I'm backing up, and April says, Dad, Brienne didn't get in the car seat. I said, Brienne, get in the car seat. And she doesn't. And this was a surprise, because I've had kids that were difficult, and Brienne wasn't one of them. And so I went on down the road, and I pulled over by a creek. And I remembered my mom using a switch. So I got out, and I got little Brienne out, and she was maybe a little bit older than this, but about this age. And I got little Brienne out, and we went out beside the car, and I went and I got a switch, and I brought it over, and we had the talk. We had the lecture. I said, you know, God gave you me, and God gave you to me, and it's my job before God to teach you to do right and to obey. And you didn't obey, and you're going to have to get a spanking. And I spanked little Brienne with that switch. And she cried, but she wasn't as brokenhearted as you might think, because she was pretty determined that day. I said, now get in the car seat. And little Brienne got up and got in the car and sat down beside the car seat. And I brought her back out. And we had another lecture. And I spanked her harder. I said, now Brienne, get in the car seat. And this time, little Brienne got in the car and sat down beside the car seat. I brought her out again. We had a firmer talk. She got a firmer spanking. And she sat down beside the car seat. Brought her out again. We had another firm talk and another firm spanking. And I think again, sat down beside the car seat. I think it was time, I might have missed count here. I think it was the 5th time. Finally, Brienne got in the car seat and buckled herself in. Now, like the deal with the pants earlier, you know what would have been easier on me? I could have picked her up, put her in the car seat. But would that have trained her? That would have controlled her, but it wouldn't have trained her. Later that day, I said to her, I said, Brienne, I said, why did you not keep not sitting in the car seat? I said, did you think that Daddy was going to give up? And little Brienne went, uh-huh. And my little Brienne needed to find out that day that her daddy was not going to give up. And she found out. And she hardly gave me any more trouble the rest of her growing up. And now she's raising 3 little girls that she's training, and when they need a spanking, they get a spanking. But she loves them, and she trains them, and they're wonderful little girls, and she's due this week. That's why my wife's not with me. She's kind of acting as a doula. And this one's going to be a home birth. So some of our kids were born at home. I'm not recommending that necessarily as a side note, but just say a prayer for them and safe delivery this week. Settling for situation control instead of training up the child. Mere control versus training. You've heard parents say this. Well, I told them they're never going to do that under my roof. You ever heard dads say that? Yeah, I told all my boys, you're not going to do that under my roof. And they say it with such like, I did my part. Well, that's better than saying, yeah, sure, do drugs under my roof. Sure, sleep with your girlfriend under my roof. But man, that is not parenting. Because if all you do is not allow them to do it under your roof, then where are they going to do it? They're going to do it under their friend's roof, or they're going to say, I can't wait till I'm 18 and get out of this roof so I can do what I want there. That's not training. Proverbs didn't say, control your child, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. No, they'll depart. You just control a child for 18 years, man, they're going to be itching to depart and do what they want to do away from you. It says, train up your child in the way that they should go. Be training that little heart so that they want to do what's right under your roof, under their friend's roof, under their dorm room roof, under their own roof. Because you trained them. You didn't just control them. Sometimes you have to do some controlling, but what they need is training. Train up a child and train their hearts. There's a story of a little boy in class. I don't know if it was a schoolroom or a Bible class, but he wouldn't sit down. The teacher kept trying to get him to sit down. Finally, he sat down, but as he did, he said, all right, but I'm still standing up on the inside. If your little one's giving you trouble and he's still standing up on the inside, we're not done. Because it's not just sitting down, it's sitting down with the right attitude. And let me tell you something else. After the talk and after the spanking, then there needs to be the apology. And then get a hug. So many times with my little ones, it might go like this. Say, oh no. Say they're 3 or something. Oh no. What did mommy say do? Mommy said don't do it. And what did you do? I did it. And say, what do you have to get? A spanking. I said, that's right. I said, is daddy mad at you? Does daddy love you? And then this is, the Bible doesn't say this, but I'll just throw it out. I would give them some choices to just kind of involve with them. So instead of something happening to me, it's something we're doing together. I'd say, which hand do you want it on? Okay, all right, so we'll do it on that hand. And then sometimes they say, do you want to go tell mom you're sorry first and then get the spanking, or you want to get your spanking first and then go tell mom you're sorry? Spanking first. And then they get their spanking, and then they go tell mom, I'm sorry. And then they get their hug. If they get a spanking and they stomp off, not done. We're not just, I'm going to punish my child. There's some punishment involved, but it's training the child. You're training the heart. Mistake number 12, mistaking taking them to church for bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Deuteronomy, you shall teach them diligently. Talk to them when you sit in your house, when you walk, when you lie down, when you rise up. Years ago, I was doing this series, and a brother was in the hospital, and we went to go visit him. And it was an old man. I'd never met him before. But he was talking to me, and he said something really, really sad. So he was a good bit older. His kids were kind of younger, middle age. And he had 4, and none of them were faithful to God. And this was the statement he made. He said, all 4 are unfaithful. Not a single one is faithful to God. He says, I don't know what happened. We took them to church all those years. And in that statement right there, you could see exactly what had happened. Listen to the words he said. I don't know what happened. We took them to church all those years. Can you see the mistake? What did he think was going to train his children? Taking them to church. For a congregation that has services Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and Wednesday night, how much of that is out of a whole week? That's not much time at all. How much times are kids exposed to commercials, to the internet, to TV, to friends, to movies, to bad influences all over the place? And you think that a little bit of time here, and here in a whole week is going to combat all of that? Listen, if you're working in the emergency room and I come wheeling in my child into the ER and saying, help me, and you look and my child is severely malnourished and starving, and you're like, and you say, what happened here? I said, I don't know. I fed him Sunday dinner and Wednesday supper every week. Is it pretty obvious what happened? That's not nutrition. That's not enough. He needs more than that. Mistake number 13. Thinking if we don't allow this, they might rebel and leave the church. You ever maybe go over a friend's house or something, and you smell something coming from the son's room, or the door's open and there's a picture of, swimsuit models or something on the wall, or his daughter comes by with a bare midriff and little shorts or something, and she's headed out with it, and you'd say, you're letting her go out like that? You're letting him do that? And, well, if we don't allow this, they might rebel and leave the church. What good is being in church if they aren't in the Lord? The church is not the Savior. The church is people that have sinned against God and need the Savior and need the Lord. You can have a church that belongs to the devil. The church at Laodicea had become lukewarm, and the Lord said, I wish you were hot or cold, you're lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. If we let worldliness sit in the church, what good is that? On the day of judgment, well, I see you sat in a pew while you lived like the world. It doesn't make any difference. Do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? Entertainment, attire, interests. Let's talk about clothing choices for a minute. I'm going to do this quickly for sake of time. Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve realized they needed clothes, it said they took leaves. If you see a painting with one or two leaves, they sewed together some leaves. The word in Hebrew is kind of like a girdle. They kind of covered up their privates with some leaves. But then God put some clothes on them. Exodus chapter 28, verse 42 mentions the high priest attire and the purposes. It talks about the thing he wore on his head. It said the purpose of that was for glory and for beauty. And then it said, and have them have linen breeches from the loins to the thighs. That's inclusive. It doesn't mean below the loins and above the thighs. That would be nothing. It was from the loins to the thighs. And you know what the text says there? It says to cover the flesh of their nakedness. That was for the men. From the loins to the thighs, covering that to cover the flesh of their nakedness. 1 Timothy 2:9 talks about modest apparel, and in the context it's talking about, like extravagant, like gold and hairdo, or today it could be makeup and false things and all kind of stuff. Don't let that be the emphasis. Same in 1 Peter 3. Here's something interesting. John 21. There's a lot of people that would not answer the door in their underwear, but they'll go to the beach or the pool and they'll wear that much or less in public. Why? Now think about this seriously for a minute. Why do teenage guys especially enjoy going to the beach? Teenage guys like the sand. Teenage guys like the ocean. They also like the half-naked girls. And that's a fact. And when we say, oh, but I'm at the beach. I'm at the beach. Can you remember any passage in the Bible where it talks about how somebody dressed to go to the beach or to go swimming? I see a couple of you smiling because there is a verse about how somebody got dressed to go to the beach or go swimming. One of you men remember where that's at? It's in John 21. Peter and the guys are out fishing all night, and it's just men in the boat, and they're away from public, and they've taken out their outer garments. So they would have had on an undergarment thing like this, but their outer garment is off. And then there's somebody on the beach, and he spoke to him, and then John said, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter, I'm in the middle of verse 7, John 21. When Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he put his clothes on him, for he was naked, and cast himself into the sea and went over there to the beach where Jesus was. Just because you're playing tennis doesn't mean you got to wear this little thing. And Why do guy volleyball players wear something down to here and girl volleyball players wear something to here? The people that put it on TV know that that's going to help attract an audience, by the way. People, we live in a world, Proverbs chapter 7, verse 10 refers to the clothing of a harlot. And I had a friend of mine one time, he had girls and he went to the mall and he's trying to find them some clothes. And y'all have seen this. You go to a clothing shop and little girl clothing is styled to look like seductive, teenage young girl clothing. And my friend's looking at it and he's like, he said to the clerk, he said, pardon me, he said, do you have anything that's not prostitute clothing? And I thought that was a pretty good question. Look at this for an example. What is that? That's a security envelope. What's the purpose of a security envelope? It exposes what should be exposed, your name and address, and it covers up all your bank account information, your Social Security, or the other things that aren't anybody's business. This doesn't cover everything up because something is being shown to be available. This fence and this fence are very different. The one over there on the left, that's a nice fence, and it increases your property value, and it keeps your creepy neighbor from looking at your wife. This fence over here, it doesn't keep people from looking. It's inviting people to look. Look at my mansion. If you go, this is interesting, you go to a prison or county jail website, read what's not allowed to be worn in there. It's a pretty interesting list where it says, do not wear these things. They know how it affects men. There's a difference between this kind of packaging and this kind of packaging. Dads, your little girl, oh, she's just a little girl. She's 13. Let me tell you something. To the 13-year-old boys, your daughter is not just a little girl. Your daughter is an item of interest to little 13-year-old boys. Don't train your girls or your boys to dress like Oscar Mayer Bacon. Number 14, assuming cultural norms. And we'll be finishing up in a few minutes here. Oh, the terrible twos. They're going to do that. Or, like when I told about my little one lying, some people might think, well, children are going to tell lies. Yes, children are going to tell lies. And we parents are there to teach them, you don't do that. They also make a mess in their diaper. Children will do that. And we train them not to do it there. It's part of our job. But if we say, the twos are going to be terrible. Oh, they're a teen. They're going to be rebellious. Let me tell you something. Rebellious teens are culturally common. And you know what is also culturally common? It's culturally common for rebellious teens to go up and be ungodly adults. If you want an ungodly adult, then you just accept, they're going to be a terrible two. Oh, they're going to be a rebellious teen. And don't be surprised at all when they're an ungodly adult. Josiah was 16 years old when, even though he was on the king and it could have gone to his head, he set his heart to serve God. Timothy, who Paul picked up in the late 40s because he was impressed with him, when Paul wrote to him in the 60s, he said, don't let people despise your youth. If Timothy was a youth in the 60s, how old was he when Paul picked him up? I suspect he was a teenager when Paul picked him up. Let's continue. Mistake number 15, going into defense mode when our children are wrong. A lot of rather good parents do this. And let me tell you something. This boils down partly to pride. Before, when I mentioned what children need love, they need security, they need guidance, they need joy. They also need to learn how to work, and they need to learn humility. And some parents, because of their own pride, my children, oh God, I thank you that my children are not like his children or their children. Your children are going to be wrong sometimes. And when somebody lets you know what they did, that's not your enemy, that's your friend. Don't start defending it. Defending your children when they're wrong, denying that they were wrong, redirecting blame, Some of you may know my friend John Bosworth. John, super capable guy at so many things. Just amazes me all the things he can do. But in retirement, up near the Canadian line, he drives a school bus. And one day, this one brat on the bus was taking a permanent marker and writing on the bus. So he contacts the mom. And she's like, oh, my son did not do that. Yes, ma'am, he did. No, my son would never do that. That was not my son. Do you want to see the videotape? Because here's the thing. As soon as he said there was a videotape, she switched just like that. Switching from, no, that couldn't be my son. You know, my son would never do that. There's videotape. What did you do that made him do it? There was no like, oh, he did it? It was, no, he didn't, no, he didn't, no, he didn't. There's film. It's your fault he did it. 1 Timothy 5:21 says, do all things without partiality. Listen, when it's my kid that misbehaved, it's my kid that misbehaved. When it's my kid that broke your window, it's my kid that broke your window. When it's your kid, it's your, our kids are going to do dumb things. It's not our job to defend that. Woe to those that call evil good and good evil. And how many times have you seen parents and they've got these high standards, until one of their kids starts doing this and this and this, and then all of a sudden what? Now it's okay. No, it's not. God's standards don't change because we want to justify our child. And if you start a pattern of bailing out, don't be surprised when they come to expect it. As in, Mom, I'm in jail. I need you to bail me out. We're going to talk about this next time. Failing to train humility. It's going to take too much time. It's very important, so this would be a good stopping point. We'll pick up there next time. Thank you so very much. You've been very patient this evening. We crammed a lot in. I really appreciate your attention. And kudos to you parents raising kids. Keep it up. Enjoy it. Have fun with them. Teach them that they're not the center of the universe, but teach them to respect who is and have fun with them, enjoy them, let them work, let them learn to care about God and care about other people. And that'll be so much joy in their life because of that, and joy in your life because of that. And keep on doing the work and enjoy the benefits. Thank you very much.